14,000 by 2031, the largest expansion since the Victorian era. This investment is necessary, Mr. Speaker, but not sufficient. We cannot build our way out of this crisis. Despite building as quickly as we can, demand for places will outstrip supply by 9,500 in early 2028. And that is why I commissioned the sentencing review. Its task was clear. This country must never run out of prison places again. There must always be space for dangerous offenders. At the same time, the review was tasked with addressing the fact that our prisons too often create better criminals, not better citizens. Instead of cutting crime, they are breeding grounds of it. The reviewers have followed the evidence and the example of countries around the world. Today, I present an initial response with further detail to follow once legislation is placed before the House. Let me start with the report's central recommendation: the move to a three-part sentence called the earned progression model, which the government accepts in principle. Under this model, an offender will not necessarily leave prison at an automatic point. Instead, their release date will be determined by their behaviour. If they follow prison rules, they will earn earlier release. If they do not, they will be locked up for longer. This echoes the model I witnessed in Texas earlier this year, which cut crime and brought their prison population under control. Under this new model, offenders serving standard determinate sentences with an automatic release of 40 or 50% will now earn their release. The earliest possible release will be 1/3, with additional days added for bad behaviour. The review suggests a new maximum of 50%. But for those who behave excessively badly, I will not place an upper limit. For those currently serving standard determinate sentences with an automatic release point of 67%, their earliest possible release will be 50%. And again, for those who behave excessively badly, I will not place an upper limit. David Gauke also suggests those serving extended determinate sentences should also earn an earlier release. This we will not accept. Judges give extended sentences to those they consider dangerous, with no parole board hearing until 2/3 of time served, and I will not change that. I can also confirm no sentences being served for terror offences will be eligible for earlier release from prison. In the second part of the progression model, offenders will enter a period of intensive supervision. This will see more offenders tagged and close management from probation. The government will therefore significantly increase its funding. By the final year of the spending review period, an annual £1.6 billion will rise by up to £700 million, allowing us to tag and monitor tens of thousands more offenders. If offenders do not comply with the conditions of their release, the sentencing review has suggested that recall to prison should be capped at 56 days. We have agreed to this policy in principle, though the precise details will be placed before the House when we legislate. In the final stage of the three-part sentence, offenders could still be recalled if a new offence is committed, and I will also ensure that the most serious offenders continue to be subject to strict conditions. The review also recommends a reduction in short prison sentences. A compelling case for doing so has been proposed in this House many times. In the most recent data, nearly 60% of those receiving a 12-month sentence reoffended within a year. With reoffending rates for community punishment consistently lower, we must ask ourselves whether alternative forms of punishment would make the public safer. It is important, however, to note that the review recommends a reduction in short sentences, not abolition. It is right that judges retain the discretion to hand them down in exceptional circumstances. In considering exceptional circumstances, we will continue to ensure courts have access to thorough risk assessments for domestic abuse and stalking cases, and breaches of protective orders linked to violence against women and girls will be excluded. The review also recommends an extension of suspended sentences from 2 to 3 years. In this period, the prospect of prison time hangs over an offender should they break any conditions imposed upon them, and we accept this recommendation. The recommendation set out above will see more community punishment, Mr. Speaker, and for that reason, it is essential that it works. The review recommends a series of measures to make community punishment tougher and to force offenders to pay back to those they have harmed. We will consider new financial penalties, which could see offenders' assets seized, even if they are not knowingly linked to crime, and expanded use of punishments like travel and driving bans, which would curtail offenders' liberty. We accept a recommendation to expand intensive supervision courts. These impose tough conditions, including treatment requirements that tackle the root causes of prolific offending. Offenders are brought before a judge regularly to monitor compliance, and the prospect of prison hangs over them like a sword of Damocles. But I believe community punishment must be tougher still. Unpaid work must pay back. So I will shortly bring together business leaders to explore a model where offenders work for them with a salary paid not to the offender but made for the good of victims. I will also work with local authorities to determine how unpaid work teams could give back to their communities, be that filling potholes or cleaning rubbish. Mr. Speaker, I also invited David Gauke to consider cohorts of offenders this government believes require particular focus. I welcome his recommendations on female offenders. Approximately 2/3 of these receive short sentences, around the same number of victims of domestic abusers. And I am pleased to say the review's recommendation on short, deferred and suspended sentences will reduce the number of women in prison. I also asked David Gauke to consider how we tackle foreign national offenders. Today, our deportation rate is ahead of the last government. I welcome the recommendations to make it quicker and easier to deport foreign criminals. Under the existing scheme, they are sent back to their country of origin after serving 15% of the custodial sentence. We will bring this down to 30%. We will also conduct further work with the Home Office on how we can deport foreign prisoners serving less than 3 years as soon as possible after their sentencing. I also asked the review to consider how we manage sex offenders. The review has recommended we continue a pilot of so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal. I will go further, with a national rollout beginning in 2 regions covering 20 prisons, and I am exploring whether mandating the approach is possible. Of course, it is vital that this approach is taken alongside psychological interventions that target other causes of offending, like asserting power and control. Mr. Speaker, when discussing sentencing, it is too easy to focus on how we punish offenders when we should talk more about victims. Everything I'm announcing today is in pursuit of a justice system that serves victims. If our prisons collapse, it is victims who pay the price. And by cutting reoffending, we will have fewer victims in future. But there is also more we must do to support victims today. The review recommends a number of important measures, including better identifying domestic abusers at sentencing so that we can monitor and manage them more effectively. And I would like to pay tribute to those who have campaigned on this, particularly the Honourable Member for Eastbourne. I also welcome the recommendation to expand the use of domestic abuse specialist courts, where trained staff support victims. To improve transparency in the system, we will extend a pilot of free sentencing transcripts for victims of rape and serious sexual offences. But I also want to go further than the review recommends to better support victims. Exclusion zones are an important tool preventing offenders from entering areas that their victims might be. But these place greater limits on victims than they do offenders. And I want to change this, locking offenders down to specific locations so victims know they are safe wherever else they want to go. Mr. Speaker, this review sets out major reform. I know its recommendations will not be welcomed by all. By appointing David Gauke, a former Conservative Lord Chancellor, I hope to show that two politicians from different traditions can agree on the reform our justice system requires. I don't expect those opposite to join with me to solve this crisis. In fact, I can hear their sound bites already. Just build faster, they will say. Well, we're building faster than them. We have already added 2,400 places and are now investing £4.7 billion more. Just deport more foreign criminals, they will say. Well, we're ahead of where they were, and today we have accepted major reform to go further and faster. Clear the court's backlog, they will say, despite having created it themselves. Well, we're investing more in our courts than they ever did, and we are ready to embrace once-in-a-generation reform to deliver swifter justice for victims. While we are doing more on each of these than they ever did, these are not solutions that rise to the scale of the crisis that they left behind. We must build prisons on a historic scale, deport foreign national offenders faster than ever, and speed up our courts. Yet still, despite all that, we must reform sentencing too. So, more in hope than expectation, despite, not because of experience, and by appealing to the better angels of their nature, if they have any, I end by inviting those opposite to help us fix the crisis that they left behind. Mr. Speaker, I commend this statement to the House.
Shadow Lord Chancellor Robert.
Mr. Speaker, today is about one question. Should violent and prolific criminals be on the streets or behind bars? I think they should be behind bars. For all the Justice Secretary's rhetoric, the substance of her statement could not be clearer. She's okay. Her party is okay with criminals terrorising our streets and tormenting our country. The truth is this. Any government...
Order. I thought people had come to listen to the statement, and I expect them to listen. I expected this front bench to be quiet. I certainly expect better from this front bench.
Mr. Speaker, the truth is this. Any government serious about keeping violent criminals behind bars, any government willing to do whatever it took, could obviously find and build prison cells required to negate the need for these disastrous changes. What do the changes amount to?
Mr. Swallow, you're getting very excited. You're telling me how good of a school teacher you are. This is a very bad example of it. Lord General.
What do these changes amount to? A get-out-of-jail-free card for dangerous criminals. Has the Justice Secretary even gone through a court listing recently? Pick one, anywhere in our country. Those currently going to jail for 12 months or less are not angels. They're Adam Gregory in Caen, who got 12 months for sexually assaulting his partner. Vinnie Nolan, who got 12 months for breaking someone's jaw. Sean Lardley, 10 months for beating his partner. Or Paul Morris, who got 6.5 months for shoplifting 36 times. Her plan is to let precisely these criminals loose. It's a recipe for a crime wave. And what about the Justice Secretary's plan for most criminals going to jail to serve just 1/3 of their prison sentence there? For her slashing of sentences across the board, discounts so big they'd make Aldi and Lidl blush. I'd call it a joke, Mr. Speaker, if the consequences for the public weren't so terrifying. In fact, it gets worse, because criminals who plead guilty, and most do, already get a third cut in their sentence. So under her scheme, a burglar who pleads guilty to an 18-month headline term would spend just 1/5 of that term in jail. Barely 11 weeks. 11 weeks for smashing through a family's door, storming through a child's bedroom, looking for valuables, leaving them traumatised for life. Is this the Justice Secretary's idea of justice for victims? The least she could do is here and now guarantee that violent criminals, domestic abusers, stalkers, sexual assaulters won't be eligible for any discount in their sentence. Will she commit to that? And if, Mr. Speaker, if not prison, what's the plan to punish these criminals and to keep the public safe? Well, the Justice Secretary says it's digital prisons. As she puts it, prison outside of prison. Words that lead most people in this country to conclude the Justice Secretary is out of her mind. I'm all for technology, but tags are not iron bars. They can't stop your child being stabbed on their walk home from school, or a shop being ransacked time and time again, or a domestic abuser returning to their victim's front door.
Can I just say, out from my, I don't think it's the language we should be using. I'm sure the Secretary would like to reflect on that.
Of course, Mr. Speaker. The Ministry of Justice's own pilot scheme found 71% of tagged offenders breached their curfew. When it comes to stopping reoffending, tags are about as useful as smoke alarms are at putting out bonfires. What is the Justice Secretary going to say when she meets the victims of offenders that she let off? How is she going to look them in the eye and say with a straight face, "I'm sorry"? We're looking into how this criminal escaped from their digital prison cell. Mr. Speaker, her reforms are a recipe for carnage. I urge the Justice Secretary to change course, to make different choices. Yes, choices. Choices we knew they would make from the day the Prime Minister handpicked Lord Timpson as Prisons Minister, a man who's on the record saying a lot of people in prison shouldn't be there. 2/3 of them, in fact, he said, that they'd been there for far too long. The Labour Party are clearly ideologically opposed to prison, which is why they're letting criminals off with a get-out-of-jail-free card, rather than deporting the 10,800 foreign national offenders in our prisons, 1 in every 8 cells, and it's rising under her watch. If she's actually serious about keeping violent criminals off our streets and finding the cells that are needed, will she bring forward legislation tomorrow, disapply the Human Rights Act that is stopping us from swiftly deporting foreign national offenders? Mr. Speaker, there are 17,800 prisoners on remand, awaiting trial. Again, that figure has risen under the Justice Secretary. In fact, her own department's figures forecast that it could rise to as many as 23,600. Is she serious? Will she commit to taking up the Lady Chief Justice's request for extra court sitting days to hear those cases and free prison spaces? Mr. Speaker, if she's serious, will she commit, here and now, to building more than the meagre 250 rapid deployment cells her prison capacity strategy says she's planning to build this year? They have been built in 7 months before, and they can be built even faster. If she was serious, she would commit to striking deals with the 14 European countries who have spare prison capacity, renting their cells from them at an affordable price, as Denmark is doing with Kosovo. Mr. Speaker, between 1993 and 1996, her beloved Texas, the state she modelled these reforms on, a state that, by the way, has an incarceration rate 5 times higher than that of the United Kingdom, built 75,000 extra cells. If the government was serious, why can't they build 10,000 in a similar time period? Mr. Speaker, Labour aren't serious about keeping hyper-prolific offenders behind bars. In fact, there's nothing in the Justice Secretary's statement on locking them up or cutting crime, because their party doesn't believe in punishing criminals, and it doesn't really believe in prison. The radical, terrible changes made today, cloaked in necessity, but the root of them is their ideology, and it's the public who are going to be paying the price for her weakness.
Lord Chancellor.
Very much of a shout.
Oh, Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Minister opposite talked about serious government. If his government that he was a part of had ever been serious, they would have built more than 500 prison places in 14 years in office. He is a new convert to the prison building cause. He and his party have never stood up in this chamber and apologised for only adding 500 places.
I want the same respect from this side as well.
If I was waiting for...
We understand each other.
Speaker, if I was waiting for respect from the members opposite, I'd be waiting a long time. It's a good job I don't need it. Mr. Speaker, he talked about iron bars, but he was part of a government that did not build the prison places that this country needs. Unlike him, I take responsibility, and it has fallen to me to clean up the mess he and his party left behind. Let me spell out for him, Mr. Speaker, in case there is any confusion of what happens when he and his party leave our prison system on the brink of collapse, which is exactly what they did, and the prospect that faced me on day one when I walked in to the Justice Department. When prisons are on the verge of collapse, Mr. Speaker, you basically only really have two choices left at your disposal. You either shut the front door in or you have to open the back door out. His party knew that that is the situation that they were confronted with, but did they make any decisions? No, they just decided to call an election instead. They did a runner, and the public put them in their current position. And if they ever want to get out of that position, Mr. Speaker, I would suggest they start by reckoning with the reality of their own track record in office. It should, in any other reality, have started already with an apology. Many times the members opposite have had a chance to apologise to the country for leaving our prisons on the point of absolute collapse, and they have never taken it. And Mr. Speaker, frankly, that tells you everything anyone needs to know about the modern Conservative Party.
Committee on this lot.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome the report on the government's response? It's a comprehensive and measured response to the prisons crisis, as one would expect from David Gauke, and in contrast to the hysterical nonsense we've heard from the opposition today. I particularly welcome the additional resources for probation and electronic monitoring to enable robust punishment and control in the community as an alternative to custody. But even the aggregate effect of the measures in the report will only stabilise the prison population over the longer term. Does my right honourable friend agree that we also need effective rehabilitation to end the cycle of reoffending if we're to see a fall in historically high prison numbers?
Mr. Speaker, I thank my honourable friend, the Chair of the Justice Select Committee. Let me be clear, we will be adding prison places to the estate, and we will be filling them up. The prison population will rise year on year by the end of this Parliament, but he is right that the measures we've announced today do stabilise the prison population. We will have to, as a whole country, do better on making sure that our prisons are churning out better citizens rather than the better criminals at present. When we know that 80% of offenders are reoffenders, clearly there is much work to be done in this area.
Liberal Democrat spokesperson Judge Bradbury.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I start by saying that it is an absolute honour to be able to share with my mum, who's a survivor of domestic abuse at the hands of a former partner, that campaigning fuelled by our harrowing experiences at home all those years ago and the experiences of many other survivors across the country has contributed to the government heeding our calls to better identify domestic abuse in the criminal justice system. This increased visibility and the interventions that it will inform to patch up what was an outrageous gap in the system stands to protect victims and survivors across the country, and I sincerely thank the government for listening to us on this point. My party and I will hold the government to account on the implementation of this, and we would like to get clarity on the record that the new identifier would mean that the government could be empowered to exclude domestic abusers from, for example, an SDS-40 early release scheme, and that partners using Clare's law would see offences flagged as domestic abuse in light of this. And something that must be said is that it is absolutely appalling that the Shadow Justice Secretary has just tried to play politics with domestic abusers. He says that this government wants to let domestic abusers out early. What he fails to remember is that the end of custody supervised licence scheme under the Conservative government from October to June last year released 10,083 offenders early with no exclusions for domestic abusers. So does the Secretary of State agree with me that it is critical that this government provides more support for domestic abusers from for domestic abuse victims from the likes of their abusers in a way that this last government failed to on their watch?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank the honourable member for his remarks. I'd expect nothing less than holding us fully to account for these changes, and I look forward to working collaboratively where possible on these measures as we move forward. And I pay tribute once again to him and to his family and to his mum for the campaigning that they've done on the identification of cases arising from domestic abuse being flagged properly within our justice system. The new identifier will develop over time, and I'm sure it will inform future policy decisions made by governments of all stripes. But it is an important start point, and we are very happy to accept the recommendation, and we will move at pace so that we can make sure we deliver it. And just on Clare's law, those cases will be covered by the new measure. And in terms of more support for victims of domestic abuse, we're very keen to take forward the review's recommendation on the specialist courts because we think they have a particularly important role to play. And as I said in my speech, on the measures relating to the presumption against short sentences, we will make sure there is an exclusion relating to breaches of orders, which we know is a matter of particular concern for victims of domestic abuse. And I will engage with members across the House on where we can make further progress as well.
Sarah Owen.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Before I put my question to my right honourable friend, may I give the Shadow Justice Minister a reality check? Under his previous government, 98% of reported rape cases went completely unpunished. Under the Conservative government, rape was effectively legalised, so a little bit of humility won't go amiss. 1 in 5 adults in this country will experience domestic abuse in their lifetime. Could the Honourable Lady please explain how domestic abuse victims will be protected under these new measures?
I thank my honourable friend for her question, and I would repeat the point that I've made to the Lib Dem spokesperson, the member for Eastbourne. We will make sure that we know that there is a particular concern around the presumption against short sentences and what that might have meant for breaches of protective orders, which we know is an issue of real concern for domestic abuse victims. We want to make sure that those orders are not rendered useless because they are not seeing any prison time at all, and we know that the specific circumstances surrounding this type of violence against women need a very specific response, and that is why we've already said we'll make that exclusion, and I will work with members across the House to think about where we can make further progress.
Dame Caroline Down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome what the Minister said about female offenders, but I'd like to know a little bit more, please. Hope Street in Hampshire offers residential alternatives to custody for women and has remarkable results, and of course prevents them from being separated from their children, which drives that kind of intergenerational cycle of offending behaviour, trauma and cost to society. So do the proposals include any plans to set up more Hope Street style facilities across the rest of the country?
I thank the Honourable Lady. She raises a really important point. The combination of the measures that we are accepting from the review will mean that we see a huge reduction in the number of women going to prison. Approximately 2/3 go in for sentences of less than 1 year. She will know many of those women are victims of domestic abuse themselves. In future, we expect the numbers to drop very, very significantly, and I know we will make progress in that regard. I set out an ambition to see fewer women prisoners and ultimately to have fewer women's prisons. On the residential alternatives to custody, she'll know I've set up the Women's Justice Board. It is well represented, including from those who have personal experience of Hope Street, and we will work with the Women's Justice Board as we roll out further changes to the female estate.
Emily Darlington.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Justice Secretary if, despite what the Shadow Justice Secretary said about this putting domestic abusers and rapists out on the street, she can just absolutely cut through the rhetoric and fear-mongering from the opposite side to be clear that you have put the victims of sexual abuse and domestic abuse at the heart of it, and they will be protected, and those abusers and perpetrators will not benefit from very early release scheme.
So let me say, Madam Deputy Speaker, that all dangerous offenders, those who receive an extended determinate sentence, and that will include some of the serious offenders that she is referring to, will be excluded from this scheme. All other offenders receiving a standard determinate sentence will be within the earned progression model, but they will have to earn an earlier release, and that is why we are ensuring that there is the uplift in probation funding to make sure that all these individuals are intensively supervised in the middle stage of the sentence. The worst thing that could happen for every type of victim in this country, and in fact for every citizen of our country, is if we run out of prison places altogether. We are in this position because of the mess that the previous government left behind, and it falls to us to fix it.
Paul Carter.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Notwithstanding the nonsense, the predictable nonsense of the shadow leader of the opposition, it's indeed critical that we focus on the needs of the victim. I welcome the Lord Chancellor making that point in her statement, but we need more than fine words. So can she please commit to the House to give all victims of crime proper access to restorative justice?
I thank the honourable gentleman. Of course, restorative justice does have an important role to play within our justice system. Where it's appropriate and where it can make a difference, obviously we will make sure that it is available. But I want to make sure that victims of crime have other confidence-inducing measures at their disposal. It's why I want to look at exclusion zones in particular. It's why we want to do the domestic abuse identifier so that we can track systems, learn from the cases that are going through, and make better policy for victims in the future.
Sarah Coombs.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and I'm amazed at the gall of the party opposite, who left our prisons in utter crisis, failing victims, and I thank the Lord Chancellor for her work. 5 years ago, my constituent Diane had her world changed when her husband was killed by a driver on her phone. Not only did the driver do that, the first call the driver made was not 999, it was to her sister. When the driver is released from prison, she'll have a 4-year driving ban, but for Diane and her family, their life is devastated forever. Can the Minister set out that as we take this necessary action to fix our bursting prison system, we will make use of lengthy restrictions and lifetime driving bans for those who cause death by dangerous driving?
I'm very sorry to hear of the constituency case that my honourable friend has raised. Those are truly horrible circumstances for any family to find themselves in. I can assure her we will be rigorously pursuing the recommendations in the Gauke review relating to what are called ancillary orders, which is other orders that we can make that curtail an offender's liberty, including lengthier driving bans, which I am considering bringing forward.
Dr Neil Shastrahurst.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. Public confidence, and importantly the confidence of victims in the criminal justice system, is paramount. Since 2010, the use of community-based orders has decreased by 61%, in no small part because of concerns around offender engagement in the process. If the government is going to pursue this route, what steps has the Chancellor, the sort of Lord Chancellor, taken to model how many will reoffend, and, more importantly, that they will be rigorously reinforced?
I thank him for his question. It's why I've announced measures already today to toughen up community punishment, and we will be going further in some areas than even the review recommends. I absolutely agree with him that community punishment has to maintain the confidence of the public. I, like all other members, am a constituency member of Parliament, and I want my own constituents to be able to see community punishment as real punishment, so it's on us to make sure that it is worthy of that name, and that is why I'm considering going further on unpaid work and working with businesses to see if salaries could be paid into a victims fund, and that might be one model. I want to see offenders out filling up potholes, cleaning our streets, and I'll be working with local authorities to make sure we go as far as we can. But I assure him that community punishment, this government is committed to toughening it up and making sure that it maintains the confidence of the public.
Warren de Just.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm grateful to the Lord Chancellor for her statement this morning and also for commissioning the sentencing review. Does the Lord Chancellor agree that this government is now taking action, whereas this time last year, rather than sorting out the prison crisis when we had less than 90 places, with a prison population of 90,000, they called a general election instead. Does the Lord Chancellor also agree that the present proposals will ensure that dangerous criminals, offenders, will be locked up, and also it will enable us to rehabilitate others and stop reoffending, which costs us £22 billion a year?
My honourable friend is right. This time last year, the party opposite had a chance to put the country first. Instead, they called an election and tried to put themselves first. They did a runner on the job, and it falls to us to clean up their mess, and this government will clean up their mess, and we will get our prison system onto a sustainable footing so that there is always a prison place, and there will be more prison places under this government. We'll make sure there's always a prison place for the most dangerous offenders, and it's why we're taking all of the other measures that we need to take to ensure we never run out of prison places again.
Sir Desmond Swain.
Respect for justice is diminished by the fiction of the judge announcing a sentence, and those in the know then doing a calculation on the back of a fag packet for the fraction that it actually represents. Hasn't this statement reinforced that system with bells on?
Quite the opposite.
Oh, I'm sorry to have to break it to the honourable gentleman, but he'll be horrified to discover he agrees with David Gauke on this one. The independent reviewer has pointed out that transparency in the new system will be paramount to maintaining confidence in the justice system, and we will be making sure that we take those transparency measures forward.
Charlotte Nichols.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. With the National Police Chiefs Council having declared violence against women and girls as a national emergency, it is right that we explore radical methods to bring down the scale of offending in our communities. We know most sexual offending is not about sex at all, but about power. But for the subsection of convicts whose offending is sexual compulsion driven, for whom chemical castration could be an option, is there estimate data on how many future offences this could prevent, as by definition it's only for those who have already offended? And as I'm not aware of a method of permanent chemical castration, is there capacity within the probation service to monitor ongoing compliance with treatment?
I thank my honourable friend for her questions. The studies that exist show a 60% reduction in offending. She's right to say that for this subset of offenders, for some the offending relates to power, but for another subset of offenders, the combination of chemical suppressants and psychological interventions can, we believe, have a big and positive impact. For many years, there's a pilot that has been sort of trundling along and nobody has shown much interest in it, including any of my predecessors. Tory Justice Secretaries have just sort of let it carry on. I'm not willing to do that. I'm not squeamish about taking these further measures. It's why we're going to have a national rollout of this programme. I will make sure that that is what happens. It's why I'm starting with expanding it to 2 further regions, including prisoners in 20 further prisons, so that we can build the evidence base and make sure that we are using every tool at our disposal that can cut reoffending.
Sarah Olney.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And can I say how much I welcome the government's commitment to extending the pilot scheme, giving free sentencing transcripts from rape and serious sexual offences, which is something for which I have long campaigned. I'm sorry that the Victims Minister has just left, because I wanted to pay tribute to her for her particular work on this issue, which I know that she has worked hard for. But can I also pay tribute to the victims, the survivors and the campaigners, particularly my own constituent Juliana Talizzi, for their bravery and advocacy on this issue. I look forward to continuing to work with the Minister on this issue, but can I just ask the Lord Chancellor what measures will be taken to ensure that victims know about this scheme, that they understand their rights to request a transcript of the sentencing remarks, because I know that the pilot has shown how much this contributes to their recovery and their welfare after sentencing. Thank you.
Well, let me pay tribute to the Honourable Lady and the work that she has done in this area. I will pass on her remarks to the Victims Minister, but let me also say a huge thank you to her constituents as well. It's very difficult to raise these issues and talk about them openly, and her constituent has shown real bravery in coming forward and explaining why this would have made a difference to her own recovery. I'm very pleased to extend the pilot scheme. We will learn the lessons about how the first pilot scheme worked in the first year, and if there are more things that we need to do do on publicising what the scheme can do and its availability, we will do so. And she will know that I want to make further progress on using AI technology to be able to make transcripts more generally, more widely available. I do believe in a transparent justice system. I don't believe we're very far away from having tech that is accurate enough to be able to be a matter of court record, but we're not quite there yet. It is something we continue to work on.
Lindsay Farnsworth.
Deputy Speaker, in my 21 years as a Crown prosecutor, I prosecuted many cases, but I prosecuted far fewer individuals. This is because 80% of offenders are reoffenders. So I saw the same defendants time and time again. The current system does not work. Does the Minister agree with me that this new approach will reduce reoffending, cut crime and lead to fewer victims?
I thank my honourable friend. She's absolutely right to remind the House that 80% of offenders in our country are reoffenders. It tells you that our system is broken. It tells you that our prisons are creating better criminals and not better citizens. And this is something that we absolutely have to turn around if we are going to protect victims and cut crime.
Sir John Hayes.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The Lord Chancellor will know that for a very long time in this country, the prejudices of the establishment, poisoned by liberal thinking, have been at odds with the preoccupations of the vast majority of law-abiding people.
Quite right.
So will she acknowledge now that the principal purpose of prison is retributive? It is about punishment. It has other purposes too, but its principal purpose is that. And will she, in that spirit, confirm this? When will she bring forward this further legislation she promised on sentencing? And will she confirm now that, in what she said today, violent, sexual offenders will be excluded from this early release?
Well, let me say to the honourable gentleman, I mean, I have no truck with anyone else's prejudices, and they certainly do not decide what I do in office. Let me tell him, I believe in prison. And this government is going to build more prison places, and we will fill those prison places. And I believe in prison for the reasons of punishment, primarily. I agree with him on that. But that is also why I won't let this country run out of prison places, because I know what will happen if we run out of prison places. And I am not willing to put anyone in this country through the breakdown of law and order in our country. I'm not willing to take that risk. It means harder choices are in front of me and this House as we get ourselves out of this crisis. And I am making those choices today, and I will bring forward legislation at the earliest opportunity, working at pace, so the House can consider the proposals in full. I will tell him that extended determinate sentences, the most dangerous offenders, as judged by a judge in a court, will be excluded from these measures. And for all other offenders, release earlier will have to be earned in order to come out. And after that stage, there will be intensive supervision. It is the earned progression model. I'm sure we will debate it at length in the weeks and months ahead.
Mike Tapp.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. There is no place for foreign offenders who pose a serious risk to the public in our country. Already this government is returning more foreign national offenders than the Conservatives when they were in power. Does the Minister agree that the Tories are clearly all talk and no action?
My honourable friend puts it very well, and he is absolutely right. We have made more progress on the deportation of foreign national offenders than the previous government. We will go further. We accept the review's recommendations on dropping the threshold for early removal from 50% to 30%, and for offenders who get less than 3 years in prison, we will work up with the Home Office proposals to move to immediate deportation.
Caroline Burden.
Madam Deputy Speaker, the national average reoffending rate for people who've done a short-term sentence is 54%. After graduating from a prisoner rehabilitation programme in my constituency, the average reoffending rate is just 6%, and they are still in touch with every single graduate from their programme after operating for 10 years. Could the Minister confirm that in the spirit of trying to reduce the prison population, that rehabilitation programmes like this are absolutely crucial, and that investing in rehabilitation not only keeps people safe in the community because it reduces the reoffending rate, but it will help with the mission of freeing up prison places for the dangerous criminals who absolutely need to be there.
She makes a good point. I pay tribute to the work that's going on in her constituency. As I've said before, Madam Deputy Speaker, 80% of offenders in this country are re-offenders. It tells you how broken our system is and how imperative it is that we sort that out.
Clive Efford.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And I welcome my right honourable friend's statement. But reoffending is costing us £22 billion a year, and 80% of offenders are reoffenders. So does my right honourable friend agree with me that we need to bring that figure down? So what can she say that she's intending to do to prevent people from reoffending at the rates that they are?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. One of the problems of running a prison system at absolutely boiling hot, where you're permanently on the point of collapse, as has been the case in our prison system for far too long now, is it means that within the prison estate you're not able to make much progress on the sorts of programmes that offenders would need to access to begin a rehabilitation journey. So part of our proposals designed to relieve the stress in our prison system will help with rehabilitation within the prison estate, but we're absolutely determined to make more progress on rehabilitation outside of the prison estate. It's why we're toughening up community punishment. We know that that works. We know that it can be punishment that the country can have confidence in, and we will be working with our colleagues in the health department to think about the availability of drug and alcohol treatment. We will expand our use of sobriety tags, which are already helping offenders come off the drink that often fuels their offending, and as I've asked some tech companies to look at further technological innovation that can help us in this space. The holy grail would be a drugs tag, which I think could make a huge difference to reducing reoffending in our country, and we will continue to press ahead and work as quickly as we can to find further technological solutions.
Dr. Caroline Johnson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Madam Deputy Speaker, crimes against children are amongst the worst crimes that humanity can commit. There is relatively little, if anything at all, about offences against children within this review. Could the Lord Chancellor confirm that those who have abused children will not be allowed out early?
Well, no one who has received an extended determinate sentence, which will include many of these offenders, are excluded from these measures. All other offenders would have to earn an earlier release by proving that they have behaved properly in prison, not broken prison rules. The minimum is set at 1/3 of the sentence, but it can be higher. And as I've said today, for those who egregiously offend, we will set no upper limit.
James Nash.
We have just heard this morning that probation services in Nottinghamshire have been rated inadequate following visits by inspectors. They've been judged as understaffed with urgent improvements needed. I therefore welcome the £700 million increase for probation services, but can I ask the Lord Chancellor what other steps can be taken to drive up probation standards in constituencies like mine?
I'm very grateful to him for raising issues relating to the probation service. We've already expanded the number of people, the number of staff that we have. Last year we recruited 1,000 extra. This year we're on track to hit our target of 1,300 extra. So increasing resource with more staff, first and foremost, is a clear priority for us. Investing in technology to help the probation service be more productive. We've already funded programmes and pilots looking at AI tech designed to decrease the amount of file work that probation officers have to do in order to allow them to have more time to do the thing that only a human can do, which is spend time with the offender in front of them, come up with a proper plan to reduce their reoffending and therefore keep the public safe.
Callum Miller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I very much welcome the Lord Chancellor's statement today, and I know that victims and survivors of domestic abuse and sexual violence in my constituency will do so as well. I thank her and her ministerial colleagues for cross-party working, including with my honourable friends from Eastbourne and Twickenham. I want to ask two questions relating to that. On the domestic abuse recommendations and the application of domestic abuse at sentencing, will the Lord Chancellor consider whether it is possible to tag those offences retrospectively as well as at sentencing looking forward? deported. And I welcomed her remarks on transcripts and transparency. In the light of the pilot around transcripts for sexual violence and rape, will she consider whether it could be included that the entire transcript, not just the transcript of sentencing for these cases, could be included in that pilot?
On the issue of tagging retrospectively, I think I will certainly go away and have a look. I suspect, though I don't want to mislead him or the House, that a retrospective trawl of all cases, including common assault, which is actually where we see the most amount of domestic abuse cases land in terms of charge and criminal case, I think that might be beyond where we are able to get to with the data available to us and the time that that would take. But going forward, we will absolutely try to capture exactly those cases, so not just domestic abuse connected offences, but other offences like common assault, which we know have taken place in a domestic abuse context. They will all be flagged and proper data kept going forward. On transcripts, the availability of sentencing remarks is what is currently available for other types of victims in murder cases and so on, and it's the extension of that to victims of rape and serious sexual violence. I just repeat the point I made earlier. I believe in a transparent justice system. I would like to be in a position where actually we are using AI technology not just to make sentencing remarks available, but we're thinking about broadly what happens in courts and transcripts more widely. The thing that inhibits us is cost. We are trying to take out that cost by looking at AI models, but we can't proceed with anything unless we are absolutely certain about its accuracy, because he will, I'm sure, appreciate a document purporting to be a record of what was said at court needs to be bang on.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I welcome the fact that this government is getting on and building the largest prison expansion programme since the Victorians. Labour government in action, fixing the Tory prison crisis once and for all. Can I ask the Minister, however, to learn from the SNP Scottish Government's abject failure? The new Berlin-Glasgow prison project, delayed again, now won't be ready until 2028. 9 years late, and the cost has soared from 100 million to a staggering £1 billion for one prison. For one prison, will we learn lessons from SNP failure?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his intervention. Let me tell him that we've already learned the lessons of the Tory party's failure. I'm very sorry to hear about the situation that he describes in Scotland, but the Conservative Party's failure on prison building stemmed from two things. They could not get past their own backbenchers, and so the planning delays added billions to the cost of prison place expansion, and then they didn't make the funding certain and available in the amount that was needed in order to stimulate the funding at the rate required. We have reversed both of those things. We've made £4.7 billion available, and we made it very clear planning will not get in the way of prison building.
John Glenn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Several years ago, I was a magistrate in Westminster. My father was a magistrate in North Wiltshire, and we lamented a great deal where we put people into prison, and we found that there was a whole list of antecedents every time, and it recurred all the time. Could the Minister tell the House what assurances she can give us around prison education, rehabilitation programmes and regular work programmes, that we will avoid this pattern of, with good intentions, prescribing solutions that don't work, that cost a lot of money, and actually leave the public pretty dissatisfied with the justice system?
Look, I thank the honourable member for his question. Let me pay tribute to him, to his father, and to magistrates all over our country. They do an incredibly valuable job in keeping our justice system going. And in fact, magistrates deal with 90% of all criminal cases in our country. Let me just say to him on the issue of what he's really referring to as prolific offending, those people that keep coming back, cycling in and out of the system. The review recommends, and and we will take this forward, and I will set out more proposals as we bring legislation forward, that we switch to a model of intensive supervision courts where a judge is in charge of making sure that a treatment programme is being adhered to. The early pilots in this country, and in fairness they were started under the previous government, those early pilots have shown very, very positive progress in helping those offenders turn their lives around and break the cycle of addiction or mental health problems that often lead to prolific offending. We will build on that work.
Polly Billington.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. What does the Minister make of the extraordinary admission by the former Lord Chancellor last year that the previous government chose not to take action on the prison crisis because you have to win votes? Well, fortunately, they didn't win any votes in Margate, Broadstairs and Ramsgate, which is why I stand here today to say that neighbourhoods in East Thanet are blighted by drug dealing, theft, burglary, sex trafficking and antisocial behaviour that ebbs and flows according to whether the main criminals, organisers, pimps and coordinators and dealers are in prison or out, causing mayhem. Now, does she agree with me that it's the shortage of prison cells because of the party opposite and the lack of alternative punishments because of the party opposite that contributes to this and blights the lives of our communities?
My honourable friend makes an incredibly powerful point. She is absolutely right. When you have a prison system on the point of collapse, it's not as if the criminals don't know that that's what's happening, and it's why it is so imperative that we get our system under control and we make sure that there is always a prison place available for those people that have to be locked up in order to keep the public safe. As to her point on winning votes, I think it rather shows the approach taken by the previous government. They put themselves first and not the country first.
Miss Savile Roberts.
On behalf of the Justice Union's Parliamentary Group, I welcome the Independence Review recognition of probation officers and join the National Association of Probation Officers' call for extra direct investment in staff now. Stable accommodation upon release is also key to reoffender rehabilitation. There are presently no approved premises for women in Wales. Women's centres struggle for funding. So how will she improve rehabilitation and life chances for Welsh women in the criminal justice system?
Well, I very much hope that the position for Welsh women will be the same for women in England, which is that we see a huge reduction in the number of women in Wales and in England entering the female prison estate, and that is because the combination of the measures that David Gauke has recommended on short sentences in particular will mean that fewer women go to prison. I will, of course, work with colleagues across Wales in looking at what more we can do on accommodation provision. I know there's no specific centre in Wales. She and I have discussed that. Previously, it was a promise made by the previous government without any funding attached to it. And so I was not able to make decisions when I first came into office that could reverse that. But we will work with the Women's Justice Board and others to make sure that the offer for women who are now no longer going to be going to prison is still strong and helps them on their rehabilitation journey.
Jonathan Hinder.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. This is a day of shame for the Conservative Party. One of their own has laid bare the scale of their failure in leaving us with nowhere to put the prisoners. They used to call themselves the Party of Law and Order. We'll take it from this former police inspector. They lost that label long ago and they are never getting it back. But moving forward, the criminal justice system is just that, a system. Decisions taken on policing, courts, probation, prisons, all affect one another. So can the Lord Chancellor assure me that the implications for policing and the enforcement of these sentences is being taken into account when we roll out these changes?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. It is a day of shame for the Conservative Party. I'm sorry to see that their attitude today is shameless. Madam Deputy Speaker, my friend makes a very important point in relation to policing. I've had a good conversation with police leaders and I'm determined to use the Criminal Justice Board, the National Criminal Justice Board, to make sure that every part of the criminal justice system is aligned and we take into account all of the interactions based on this review, but also the upcoming criminal courts review as well, in terms of the impact they have, not just for the bit of the justice system I am directly responsible for, but for the wider criminal justice justice system, including policing as a whole.
Mark Pritchard.
I say to the Lord Chancellor, huge personal respect for her, and whilst I may disagree with some, by the way, not all of what she's announced today, I'd like to put that on the record. She mentions female offending. She will know there are 6 mother and baby units in female prisons in England. There are 90 applications for the last period known up to March 2024, and 64 places for mothers and 70 for babies, allowing for twins, when some mothers have those. So clearly there are not enough places. As part of this review, has she considered where there is not serious and violent offending by female prisoners, we're getting more of these mothers and babies into the community rather than in prison?
Well, let me thank him for his remarks of personal respect, and it is shared from across this House, and I thank him for that. I also thank him for the important issue that he raises. Look, I hope to move to a position where the combined impact of the changes in this review and also the work that we are doing with the Women's Justice Board means that we see a huge drop in the number of female prisoners, and I'm particularly keen to ensure that pregnant women, mothers of young children, are not anywhere near our female prison estate in the future. Of course, for serious offenders, we will always need to make sure that prison is an option, but for the vast majority of women, they go to prison on short sentences for much less serious offences, and we need to turn that around.
Chris Webb.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under the previous Conservative government, foreign criminals in our prisons rose to the tens of thousands shamefully. Can the Lord Chancellor outline to my constituents of Blackpool South what we're doing to deport these foreign criminals from our prisons as quickly as possible to free up those vital prison spaces?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. What we are doing is we are deporting at a faster rate than the previous government. We have accepted the review's recommendations to drop the threshold for early removal from this country from 50% of the custodial sentence to 30% of the custodial sentence, and we are going to work up urgently with the Home Office a plan for those who are sentenced to less than 3 years being deported as quickly as possible after sentencing itself.
James Wilde.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. In her statement, the Lord Chancellor said, under her earned progression plans, if offenders follow prison rules, they will win earlier release, and the review says that thousands of offenders will benefit from this. Can she explain to my constituents why simply following the rules means serious offenders would only serve a third of their sentence? Where's the punishment and victims' interest in that approach?
Well, he will know that the track record of his party in government was to run prisons boiling hot with violence off the charts. And, you know, the Shadow Justice Secretary has been showing a huge amount of concern for prison officers and the violence that they face in our prisons. I would have hoped that the party opposite might welcome some incentivisation in our prison system to make sure we can run safer prisons and keep our prison officers safe. Making sure that people follow the rules and that that's how they can earn an earlier release also means that for those who break the rules, they will serve longer in prison.
Andrew Pegs.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker, and can I thank my right honourable friend for her statement and her razor-like focus on fixing the broken justice and prison system this government inherited. Can I welcome the £700 million to help rebuild probation services and ask a question around rehabilitation and making community punishment pay? I think many people in my constituency will welcome a focus on community punishment being used to do the jobs around fixing potholes and rebuilding some of our services that are needed locally. But equally, I want community punishment to pay by breaking the cycle of reoffending. Can you tell us more about how this programme will actually get businesses into prisons, apprenticeships into prisons, and give young people, particularly young offenders, a way out of this cycle so we can stop them being in prison the second and third time?
My honourable friend raises a really important point. It's why this government has already rolled out employment work councils where prisons link up with employers in their region and try to make sure that there is jobs and training available for offenders leaving prison. We know that being able to work is a really important part of driving down reoffending, and that's a priority for this government. And of course, unpaid work is a very visible way of offenders making reparations to the communities that they have harmed. And so in our eyes, it has that as the primary focus. But of course, the discipline of doing that work can help for those offenders who are far away from the world of work at least get closer to it.
Jess Brown-Fuller.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. The government's plans lay out an expectation that they'll be able to manage ex-offenders in the community under intensive supervision. A probation officer in my Chichester constituency recently told me she was told off by her bosses for spending too long with offenders when she was booking just 15-minute appointments. So can the Lord Chancellor tell me when the promised investment will actually reach frontline probation services, and can she guarantee it will be enough to ensure public safety and actually reduce reoffending?
Well, let me reassure her this is a huge uplift in funding for probation. It's a £1.6 billion budget as it stands, and it increases by up to £700 million by the end of the spending review period. We have already invested in piloting AI and other technology designed to improve productivity. That is to say, where AI can complete much of the paperwork that a lot of probation officers spend far too much of their time on, often repeating the same information into different documents. That shows huge promise. We will roll that out at pace in order to give probation officers more time with the offenders in front of them, doing the thing that only a human can do, which is really get to grips with what is driving that offender's behaviour and to have a plan to tackle it, including the accessing of treatment programmes and other things in the community. So we are determined to make sure that the probation service can rise to the scale of this challenge as well. It's why the funding will help, and it's why our investment in the technology will also help.
We do have a number of members still to try and get in. If people could remember to keep their questions and their answers short. Jonathan Brash.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Location and curfew restrictions using electronic tagging to stop hyper-prolific offenders from going anywhere near a place that they could reoffend, a requirement to engage in mental health, drug and alcohol treatment, including the use of sobriety tags to address the cause of criminality, putting offenders back to work, cleaning up the communities they've harmed, chemical castration for sex offenders, the speeding up of foreign deportations, and the largest prison expansion ever. Will the Minister agree with me that this is about putting victims and the public first?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. This government is determined to clean up the mess left by the last Conservative government, to put victims first, to cut crime and make our communities safer.
John Cooper.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Scotland, under the yoke of the SNP, already has a presumption against short sentences, and now the new Scottish Commission looking at sentencing and penal policy has been accused of being packed with activists determined to keep criminals out of jail. Why is the Lord Chancellor here following this lead and failing to put victims at the heart of the justice system?
Well said, John.
What absolute rubbish, I'm sorry to say. I'm not taking any lessons from him or the SNP. This is a programme for England and Wales that I'm directly responsible for, and we're going to make it work.
Hear, hear. Go White. Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. When a previous government fails to take responsibility for the crisis they've caused, then they deserve a life sentence on the benches opposite. Yeah. I wish to take this opportunity to welcome the current construction of a new prison wing at Ranby Prison in my constituency. And it has been done by workshop-based Lane O'Rourke, who are specialists in modern methods of construction. And they are very much involved in many other construction projects across the country. If the Minister is seeking more sites for new prisons, could I propose Crown-owned land across the road from HMP Ranby, and we very much welcome the new prison there.
I shall take her early bid for further building in her constituency under advisement immediately.
Blake Stevenson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Under these proposals, foreign criminals will be deported after serving 30% of their sentence, and I appreciate that this is an improvement. The public want them to be deported right away. Does the Lord Chancellor?
Look, I think that immediate deportation, which the review recommends in relation to sentences under 3 years, or immediate deportation meaning as quickly as possible, because you still have to detain people before you can get them on a plane and back to their own country of origin. That is something that we're going to work up proposals with the Home Office on. And then for more serious offenders over 3 years, we are going to bring that threshold down from 50 to 30%.
Josh Fenton-Glynn.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I thank the Right Honourable Member for her statement today. It's a sensible response to the over-incarceration and prison places crisis. But can my honourable friend assure my Calder Valley constituents that notwithstanding these changes, the underreported and under-prosecuted crimes such as violence against women and girls will continue to be prioritised by this government?
Absolutely. This government is going to make sure that we are running a prison system that is sustainable and not on the point of collapse, so that we can make sure that dangerous offenders in this country are still being locked up, and we will make progress on our broader mission to halve the levels of violence against women and girls over 10 years.
Tessa Mond.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. I welcome the Lord Chancellor's statement and the work that David Gauke has put in to inform everything that's happening today. As a member of the Justice Committee, I'm looking forward to seeing him before us shortly. Can I seek clarity, please, on what the Lord Chancellor referred to as the so-called medication to manage problematic sexual arousal? And can she place the current research and conclusions that are available so far in the library so that we can all have information to understand what is involved in the data on which she and David Gauke have relied? I'm
very happy to make sure that the evidence is available. What I would say to her is that the very small-scale pilot that I inherited had been running for some time without anybody really paying a huge amount of attention to it. The evidence from other jurisdictions where this is being rolled out a bit more widely is stronger, but our rollout, and I want to get to a national rollout, will start with 2 extra regions, 20 more prisons, and we will build the evidence base. We want things that work, but I do believe that the combination of chemical suppressants with psychological interventions can help with a cohort of particularly difficult sex offenders.
Ben Goldsborough.
Thank you very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. So in the last 4 years of the last Conservative government, the number of foreign national offenders increased. Now, call me old-fashioned, but I believe that those who commit crimes within the UK who are not UK citizens should not serve their sentence here. Now, today's report makes a good progress forward. I'd welcome my honourable friend to actually tackle this issue urgently, because it's what South Norfolk wants to see, and it will get capacity back to our prisons.
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We're already deporting more foreign national offenders than the previous government. We are taking forward the measures from the Gauke Review to speed up and get more foreign offenders out of our system and back into their countries of origin.
Charlie Dewhurst.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Now, I wholeheartedly support my honourable friend, the member for Mid-Bedfordshire, on his call for the immediate deportation of foreign criminals. But what is the Lord Chancellor doing to ensure that the courts are not holding up these deportations, and that once deported, these criminals are never allowed back on these shores?
Well, you may have seen we've already announced, the Home Secretary, when she did the immigration white paper, I think just last week, that we are reviewing the use of Article 8 in relation to immigration cases. We'll bring forward our proposals on that in due course. We won't allow the misuse of our courts and the use of Article 8 to stop people who've got no right to be in this country from being able to stay in this country. But that will require changes to the immigration rules, which the Home Secretary is working on.
Justice Satter.
Does the Lord Chancellor agree with me that the voluntary community sector can play a vital role in supporting offenders to rehabilitate and gain vital employment and housing, such as Pathways Care Farm and Access Community Trust in my constituency of Lowestoft, who helped to prevent this reoffending?
I thank my honourable friend. She let me pay tribute to the organisation in her constituency. Voluntary organisations such as that in her constituency play a hugely important role in helping the justice system succeed at rehabilitating offenders, and we will continue to work closely and build on the review's recommendations in this area.
Rachel Gilmore.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Having sat on the Public Accounts Committee inquiry into prison overcrowding, I know full well the issue at hand and who to blame. But can the Right Honourable Lady assure me and my constituents that by not jailing criminals, my constituents will not be placed in more danger, and that when these individuals are in the community, that the local community itself will have a voice in the effectiveness and planning of these new sentences, lest we end up with similar community concerns as there are for bail, hospitals in Tiverton and Minehead. Thank you.
Well, the thing that puts the whole country at risk, including current victims of crime and future potential victims of crime, is letting our prison system collapse. And I will never let that happen. And the measures that we are taking forward from the review today are designed to make sure this country never runs out of prison places ever again. I will make sure that there is ample time for debate and discussion across this House as we bring our legislation forward.
Yeah. Josh Newbury.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. Is the Lord Chancellor as astounded as I am at the hypocrisy of the party opposite? They really are the arsonists attacking the firefighters. We are having to clean up their mess because, in the words of the National Audit Office, this crisis is a result of their failure to ensure the number of prison places was aligned with criminal justice priorities.
Yeah. I'm afraid, after some months in this job, facing the shadow ministers opposite, nothing about their behaviour surprises me anymore. I'll take notice, I think the country will notice, when they finally offer an apology for the absolute abject mess they left behind.
Yeah. John Davies.
Speaker, police officers, magistrates and judges will report that for some offenders, they would rather go to prison to be back with their mates, watching Sky TV, having 3 square meals a day. Will the Lord Chancellor agree with me that those who do go to prison should be treated harshly and more robustly than was the case in the last 14 years of the Conservative government?
We want to make sure that our prisons are used to punish offenders, that they have to abide by strict prison rules, that they should engage with programmes in prison in order to bring down their propensity to re-offend, and that ultimately we succeed in keeping his constituents safe by turning out better citizens rather than better criminals.
Luke Meyer.
Speaker, I think there are thousands of decent, moderate Conservatives all across the country who will have seen the ridiculous spectacle today of the opposition denigrating David Gauke, of all people, on the prison system. The review was absolutely clear that short sentences are driving reoffending, with 60% reoffending within the year. So can the Minister set out the steps she will be taking to cut crime and create fewer victims?
My honourable friend is absolutely right. We have to cut crime, have fewer victims and make sure that our streets are safe. That is why we have to make sure we never run out of prison places, that we never see the breakdown in law and order that would ensue if that were to happen, and that we take forward a package of measures that I've announced today that we will work on in legislation in the coming weeks and months. All of it designed to make sure that we don't run out of prison places, we put victims first and we cut crime in this country.
And the last question on the statement, Tristan Osborne.
Best until last, Madam Deputy Speaker. As a former police officer, community payback works. Does the Lord Chancellor agree with me and many of my colleagues in the criminal justice system that rehabilitation of offenders, including filling potholes, clearing fly tipping, is not only popular in Chatham and Aylesford, but in Newark and across the country?
My honourable friend makes an incredibly important point. I am determined that we toughen community punishment, that we make sure that unpaid work truly pays back to the communities that have been harmed by crime. It's why I'll work with businesses and with local authorities so we can all have a system that drives down reoffending, but where reparations are made to the communities that have been harmed by crime, whether they're in Newark, Birmingham, Ladywood or indeed anywhere else.
And that concludes the statement. I'll give a few moments for the front benches to swap over. Business statement, Leader of the House.
Very much, Madam Deputy Speaker. The business for the week commencing the 2nd of June includes Monday the 2nd of June, second reading of the Bus Services No. 2 Bill, Lords. Tuesday the 3rd of June, consideration of Lords amendments to the Armed Forces Commissioner Bill, followed by, if necessary, consideration of a Lords message. followed by general debate on dementia care. The subject for this debate was determined by the Backbench Business Committee in an unallotted time. Wednesday the 4th of June, remaining stages of the Product Regulation and Meteorology Bill, Lords. Thursday the 5th of June, debate on a motion on high street banking closures and banking hubs, followed by debate on a motion on safety regulations in the construction and planning of battery energy storage sites. The subjects for these debates were determined by the Backbench Business Committee. Friday the 6th of June, the House will not be sitting. The provisional business for the week commencing the 9th of June will include Monday the 9th of June, remaining stages of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, Day 1, Tuesday the 10th of June, remaining stages of the Planning and Infrastructure Bill, Day 2.
Shadow Minister Joy Morrissey.
Thank you, Madam Deputy Speaker. And it is an honour to be responding again to business questions as we march on to recess. And I know that the Leader of the House has had a challenging few weeks, but I want to start by thanking her for everything that the Leader has done to advocate for members in this House. But first, I want to point out that this morning we learned the government has been prevented from signing their Chagos surrender deal by the High Court. When will the Prime Minister come to the House and explain this latest humiliation and masterclass in how not to negotiate in Britain's interests? Now, I know that members opposite and members across this House have often said things that we regret in the chamber and elsewhere. And I know that the Right Honourable Lady has said she regrets her words on rape gangs. But it is for the victims of those rape gangs to decide whether those regrets are enough. And it is time for the government to finally take action on this scandal. So will she grant a debate in government time on the rape gang scandal and commit the government to the national inquiry the victims deserve? Now, I spoke last time in business questions and asked the Leader of the House to ask the Chancellor to U-turn on her disastrous economic policies. Since then, things have got even worse. This week, inflation that they inherited at 2% from the last government has surged to 3.5%. Today, public sector